I'm Samantha, 30, and at my sister Rebecca's wedding last Saturday, my father pulled me aside during the reception and said, "You're getting nothing in the will. Nothing. Your sister gets everything because she knows how to be grateful and respect family." I laughed, not because I was bitter, but because I had been secretly buying up all of his assets for the past 3 years through shell companies and legal maneuvers he was too proud to understand. What Dad didn't know was that the family business, the house he lived in, and even the venue hosting Rebecca's wedding were all technically mine, purchased during his financial struggles that he'd hidden from everyone. As he stood there threatening me with disinheritance, I realized he had no idea that there would be nothing left to inherit because I already owned it all. The revenge that followed was so perfectly orchestrated that even I was surprised by how devastating the truth became. Before we dive into the story of family betrayal and the ultimate financial checkmate, I need your predictions. What do you think happens when someone threatens to cut you off from assets you already secretly own? Did I expose everything immediately, let him keep digging his grave deeper, or find an even more creative way to reveal the truth? Drop your theories in the comments below, hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated by people who thought they held all the cards, and make sure to subscribe because this tale of business savvy and family justice will show you exactly what happens when someone's arrogance blinds them to reality. Trust me, the revelation was more satisfying than I ever imagined. Growing up as the youngest daughter in the Morrison family meant learning early that love was conditional and respect had to be earned through compliance rather than achievement. While my older sister Rebecca was celebrated for her conventional choices. Marriage to her high school sweetheart, 2 children, and a life dedicated to being the perfect wife and mother, I was the difficult daughter who chose career over family, independence over marriage, and business success over domestic contentment. The family dynamic was established when I graduated from Wharton with an MBA at 24 and immediately started my own financial consulting firm. Instead of pride in my entrepreneurial achievement, my parents seemed embarrassed by my ambition and uncomfortable with my success. "Samantha is very focused on money and career advancement," Dad would tell relatives, his tone suggesting that my professional drive was somehow inappropriate for a woman. "She hasn't learned that some things are more important than business success." Rebecca, meanwhile, was held up as the model daughter who had figured out what really matters in life. Her decision to be a stay-at-home mother was praised as wisdom, while my decision to build a business was treated as evidence of misplaced priorities and character defects. This dynamic became particularly toxic when Dad's commercial real estate business began struggling during the economic downturn of 2019. Morrison Properties had been moderately successful for 20 years, but poor financial management and Dad's resistance to modernization had left the company vulnerable when the market shifted. While Dad and Rebecca discussed his business problems at family dinners, with Rebecca offering emotional support and encouragement, I was excluded from these conversations despite having expertise that could have helped save the company. "Business isn't just about numbers and strategies, Samantha," Dad would say whenever I tried to offer advice. "It's about relationships and trust and understanding people. You can't just analyze your way to success in the real world." The condescension was breathtaking. Here I was, running a successful consulting firm that specialized in helping struggling businesses restructure and recover, and my own father dismissed my expertise because it challenged his assumptions about who was qualified to give business advice. But the real revelation about Dad's character came when I discovered through professional networks that Morrison Properties was facing bankruptcy. Instead of asking for help from his daughter, who specialized in exactly this type of crisis, he had been taking out increasingly desperate loans and mortgages to keep the business afloat. The pride and stubbornness that prevented him from accepting my professional help were also preventing him from making the difficult, but necessary decisions that could have saved his company. By the time I learned the extent of his financial problems, Morrison Properties was weeks away from foreclosure and liquidation. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Using my knowledge of commercial real estate law and business acquisitions, I began systematically purchasing Dad's assets through a network of shell companies and legal entities that obscured my ownership. When Morrison Properties creditors forced asset sales to recover their investments, my companies were positioned to acquire the properties at significantly reduced prices. The process was entirely legal and above board. Distressed asset acquisition is a standard business practice that I had handled for many clients over the years. But what made this situation unique was that I was essentially buying my own family's legacy to prevent it from being destroyed by my father's pride and poor financial management. Within 18 months, I had acquired the Morrison Properties office building, 3 commercial rental properties that had been the company's primary assets, and eventually the family home itself when Dad was forced to take out a reverse mortgage to cover his business debts. The most ironic purchase was the Riverside Country Club membership and event space where Rebecca would eventually hold her wedding. Dad had been forced to sell his membership to raise cash, and the club itself was struggling financially due to decreased membership during the pandemic. My investment company acquired a controlling stake in the club's ownership group, making me technically the owner of the venue where my family would celebrate Rebecca's marriage. Throughout this process, I maintained complete secrecy about my acquisitions. Dad believed he was selling to various investment companies and private buyers who had outbid other potential purchasers. He never suspected that his daughter was the ultimate owner of the assets he was desperately trying to liquidate. The psychological impact of these sales on Dad was profound. He went from being a successful businessman who owned substantial commercial real estate to someone who was essentially tenant in properties he had once controlled. But rather than acknowledging his poor financial decisions or asking for help from family members who could have provided it, he became increasingly bitter and resentful. His bitterness focused particularly on me, as if my professional success was somehow responsible for his business failures. At family gatherings, he would make comments about how some people care more about making money than maintaining family relationships, or how business success doesn't make up for not understanding what really matters in life. The irony was that I had spent nearly $2 million of my own money to preserve family assets that would otherwise have been lost to creditors and bankruptcy proceedings. I was literally saving his legacy while he criticized me for prioritizing money over family. But Dad's resentment crystallized around the issue of inheritance and family hierarchy. In his mind, Rebecca's conventional lifestyle choices made her the deserving daughter who should inherit the family wealth, while my focus on career success disqualified me from receiving family assets. What he didn't understand was that the family assets he planned to leave to Rebecca no longer existed in the form he imagined. The business, the properties, and the investments he considered his legacy were now owned by companies that ultimately reported to me. As Rebecca's wedding planning progressed and Dad made increasingly pointed comments about inheritance and family loyalty, I realized that a confrontation was inevitable. He was building toward a dramatic disinheritance announcement that he believed would force me to recognize my mistakes and beg for forgiveness. Instead, his announcement would reveal just how completely he had misunderstood his own financial situation and how thoroughly his pride had blinded him to reality. Rebecca's engagement to Marcus Thompson was announced at a family dinner where Dad made it clear that this wedding would be the social event that demonstrated the Morrison family's continued prosperity and respectability. Marcus came from a well-established local family that owned several successful businesses, and Dad saw this union as validation of the traditional values he believed Rebecca embodied. "We're going to give Rebecca the wedding she deserves," Dad announced, his voice carrying the pride of a successful businessman planning to demonstrate his family's status to the community. "Money is no object when it comes to celebrating our daughter's happiness and showing everyone what the Morrison family represents." The wedding he described would cost at least $80,000, be held at the prestigious Riverside Country Club, and include 250 guests from the community's business and social circles. It was exactly the kind of celebration that would establish Rebecca as the family success story and reinforce Dad's image as the patriarch who had provided well for his children. But what became immediately clear during the planning process was that Dad intended to use the wedding as another opportunity to demonstrate my inferior status within the family hierarchy while showcasing Rebecca's favored position. Samantha, I want you to understand that this wedding is about Rebecca and Marcus, not about business or financial matters, Dad said during our first wedding planning meeting, his tone suggesting that I needed guidance about appropriate behavior at family celebrations. Of course, Dad. I'm excited to celebrate Rebecca's happiness. Good. I also want you to understand that the costs for this wedding are being handled by me personally. This isn't a business expense or an investment. It's a father providing for his daughter's special day. I don't need financial advice or suggestions about how to manage these expenses more efficiently. The message was clear, my expertise was unwelcome, and my input was unnecessary. Dad wanted to demonstrate his ability to fund Rebecca's wedding independently, without assistance or guidance from the daughter whose business success he resented. But as the wedding planning progressed and the expenses mounted, it became obvious that Dad was struggling to cover the costs he had so confidently committed to providing. The reception venue required a substantial deposit, the catering was more expensive than anticipated, and the various vendors were demanding payment schedules that strained his available cash flow. I watched him become increasingly stressed and irritable as he dealt with these financial pressures while maintaining his public image as the generous father who could afford anything his daughter wanted. The pride that prevented him from asking for help was the same pride that had destroyed his business, and it was now threatening to undermine Rebecca's wedding celebration. The irony was that I could have easily covered all wedding expenses without affecting my business or personal finances. But Dad's insistence on handling everything independently meant that Rebecca's dream wedding was being compromised by his financial limitations and stubborn refusal to accept help. The situation became particularly awkward when Dad started making subtle requests for financial assistance disguised as business opportunities or investment suggestions. Samantha, I've been thinking about that property investment strategy you mentioned, he said during one family dinner, his tone casual, but his eyes betraying desperation. Maybe we could discuss some partnership opportunities that might be mutually beneficial. The partnership opportunities he was alluding to were transparent attempts to access my financial resources without acknowledging that he needed help. He wanted me to invest in projects or ventures that would provide him with the cash flow to fund Rebecca's wedding, while allowing him to maintain the fiction that he was handling the expenses independently. But I had a different strategy in mind. Instead of providing direct financial assistance that would enable Dad's continued denial about his situation, I decided to let him experience the full consequences of his pride and poor financial management. When he hinted about investment partnerships, I responded with professional interest, but insisted on proper due diligence and documentation. When he suggested business collaborations, I required detailed financial statements and legal agreements that revealed the extent of his cash flow problems. I appreciate the opportunity to work together, Dad, but my business requires thorough financial analysis before making investment commitments, I explained when he became frustrated with my bureaucratic approach to what he considered family assistance. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Samantha. You treat everything like a business transaction instead of recognizing that family should help family without contracts and documentation. Family should help family, I agreed, but good business practices protect everyone involved and ensure that family relationships aren't damaged by financial misunderstandings. As the wedding date approached and Dad's financial stress became more obvious, I realized that the celebration would provide the perfect opportunity for the confrontation that had been building for years. Dad had spent months positioning himself as the successful patriarch, providing generously for his favored daughter's wedding, while criticizing me for prioritizing business over family relationships. The The wedding would be his moment to demonstrate family hierarchy and make clear which daughter deserved inheritance and recognition. But it would also be the moment when his complete misunderstanding of his own financial situation would be revealed, along with the truth about who actually owned the assets he planned to use as weapons in our family power struggle. The morning of Rebecca's wedding arrived with perfect weather and flawless execution at the Riverside Country Club, a venue that looked exactly as expensive and prestigious as Dad had intended when he booked it to demonstrate the Morrison family's continued prosperity. Every detail was elegant and sophisticated, from the imported flowers to the premium champagne service, creating the impression of a family that spared no expense for important celebrations. I arrived early, dressed in an elegant navy suit that had cost more than most people's monthly salary, carrying myself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what the day would bring. The irony of celebrating at a venue I technically owned while being treated as the less favored daughter was not lost on me, but I was prepared to let Dad's drama play out naturally before revealing the truth. The ceremony was beautiful, held in the club's garden pavilion with views of the golf course and lake that had made this venue so desirable to families seeking to demonstrate their social status. Rebecca looked radiant in her designer gown, Marcus was handsome in his custom tuxedo, and their families seemed genuinely happy to be celebrating this union of two successful local dynasties. But I could see the stress lines around Dad's eyes and the forced quality of his smile as he played the role of the generous father hosting an expensive celebration. The financial pressure of funding this wedding was taking its toll, even as he maintained his public image as someone who could afford anything his daughter wanted. The reception began with cocktails on the club's terrace, where I mingled with other guests while observing the social dynamics Dad had worked so hard to orchestrate. Business associates praised his generosity, family friends complimented the elegant celebration, and community members acknowledged the Morrison family's continued prominence and success. "Your father has really outdone himself with this celebration," said one of his former business partners, making conversation during the cocktail hour. "It's wonderful to see Rebecca getting the wedding she deserves. Your parents must be so proud to be able to provide this level of celebration for their daughter." "Dad has always been committed to giving Rebecca everything she wants," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Family has always been his top priority." The conversation continued with people praising Dad's success and expressing admiration for his ability to fund such an elaborate wedding during challenging economic times. No one suspected that the patriarch they were celebrating was essentially bankrupt and that the venue itself was owned by companies controlled by his supposedly unsuccessful daughter. As the evening progressed through dinner and dancing, I could see Dad becoming more confident and expansive. The successful execution of Rebecca's dream wedding was validating his self-image as the family patriarch and successful businessman, despite the financial reality he was desperately trying to hide. But I also noticed him drinking more heavily than usual and making increasingly pointed comments about family loyalty, inheritance, and the importance of respecting traditional values. He was building towards something, a dramatic statement or confrontation that would establish family hierarchy and make clear his feelings about his daughter's different life choices. The moment came during the father-daughter dance, when Dad took the microphone to make what appeared to be a heartfelt speech about Rebecca's wedding and his feelings about family. "Rebecca represents everything that makes me proud to be a father," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the reception area. "She understands that family comes first, that success means more than money in the bank, and that some values are more important than business achievements." The speech continued with praise for Rebecca's character, her commitment to family, and her understanding of what really matters in life. But it was also clearly a pointed criticism of different values and choices, delivered in front of 250 guests who understood exactly which daughter he was criticizing. After the dance ended and Dad returned the microphone, he approached my table with the confident swagger of someone who believed he held all the power in our family dynamic. "Samantha, I need to talk to you privately," he said, his voice carrying enough authority to make nearby guests turn and watch our interaction. We stepped onto a quieter section of the terrace, away from the main reception area but still visible to other guests who were clearly interested in this family drama playing out at Rebecca's wedding. "I want you to understand something," Dad began, his voice tight with emotion and alcohol. "Tonight has shown everyone what success really looks like. This is what it means to provide for your family and demonstrate real values, not just making money for your own selfish purposes. It's been a beautiful celebration, Dad." Rebecca looks happy. She is happy because she has a father who understands priorities and can provide for his family when it matters. "Unlike some people, I don't measure success in dollar amounts or business deals." The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating, but I remained calm and waited for him to reach his conclusion. "Which brings me to something important I need to tell you," he continued, his voice rising slightly with the conviction of someone delivering what he believed would be devastating news. "Your attitude and choices have consequences, Samantha. I've been thinking about inheritance and what happens to the family assets when I'm gone." He paused for dramatic effect, clearly expecting this announcement to create anxiety or panic about my financial future. "You're getting nothing," he declared, his voice carrying the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. "Nothing. The business, the properties, the investments, all of it goes to Rebecca because she knows how to be grateful and respect family. She understands what loyalty means, and she deserves to inherit from parents who sacrificed to build something meaningful." The silence stretched between us as he waited for my reaction to this bombshell announcement. He expected tears, pleading, or angry arguments about fairness and family responsibility. Instead, I laughed. Not a bitter or angry laugh, but genuine amusement at the absurdity of someone threatening to withhold assets that no longer existed in the form he imagined. "You think this is funny?" Dad's voice carried outrage at my inappropriate response to his serious announcement. "Dad, I think there's something you need to understand about your financial situation and the assets you're planning to distribute in your will." The confidence in his expression began to waver as he processed my calm response and the implications of what I might know about his business affairs that he hadn't shared. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Morrison Properties filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago, and all the assets you consider your legacy were sold to pay creditors. The business, the rental properties, even this house you're living in, none of it belongs to you anymore." His face went pale as the implications of my knowledge began to sink in. "But more importantly," I continued, "I think you should know that those assets weren't lost to random buyers or investment companies. They were acquired by companies that I own and control. Dad, I didn't just buy your struggling business. I bought everything you're threatening to keep from me." The silence that followed was profound as he processed what I was telling him. The family patriarch who had just threatened to disinherit me was learning that he had nothing left to distribute because his supposedly unsuccessful daughter had already acquired it all. "That's impossible," he whispered, but his voice carried no conviction. "It's entirely possible and completely legal," I replied calmly. "When you were too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to accept business advice, I used my resources and expertise to preserve family assets that would otherwise have been lost to creditors. Everything you think you own actually belongs to companies that ultimately answer to me." As the reality of his situation became clear, Dad's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning understanding of how completely he had misunderstood his own financial position. The patriarch who had spent years criticizing my business focus had just learned that his business focus was the only thing standing between the family and complete financial ruin. The silence between us stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds as Dad processed the enormity of what I had just revealed. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a kind of horrified recognition as he began to understand that his threats about inheritance were meaningless because he no longer controlled the assets he was threatening to withhold. You're lying, he said finally, but his voice carried no conviction. The bank told me the properties were sold to investment companies. I signed papers, I received payments. You did sign papers and receive payments, Dad. From Morrison Asset Management, Chin Holdings, and Riverside Investment Group, all of which are subsidiary companies owned by my primary business entity. I bought your properties, your business, and even your house through legal acquisitions during your bankruptcy proceedings. I pulled out my phone and showed him documentation that I had prepared for exactly this moment: corporate filings, property deeds, and ownership certificates that proved my control of what he considered his legacy. The country club where we're celebrating Rebecca's wedding? My investment company acquired a controlling stake when the club faced financial difficulties during the pandemic. The office building where Morrison Properties used to operate? That's mine too. Even the house you're living in belongs to one of my companies, though I've allowed you to remain as a tenant without realizing the change in ownership. Dad's eyes widened as he scrolled through documents on my phone, seeing his signature on sale agreements to companies that he now understood were ultimately controlled by his daughter. But why? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. If you owned everything, why didn't you tell me? Why let me think I was still in control? Because you never asked for help, Dad. You never acknowledged that your business was failing or that you needed assistance from someone with expertise in financial recovery. Instead, you criticized my focus on business success while your own poor financial decisions destroyed everything you had built. The conversation was happening in full view of wedding guests who had begun to notice the intensity of our discussion. Some were discreetly watching from the terrace, clearly sensing that family drama was unfolding during what was supposed to be a celebration. I tried to save Morrison Properties by preserving the assets rather than letting them disappear into bankruptcy liquidation, I continued. Every property I bought, every investment I made, it was all designed to keep family assets within the family, even if you were too proud to accept direct help. But the money. I needed that money to live, to pay for Rebecca's wedding. The money you received from selling the properties was real, Dad. I paid fair market value for assets that were about to be seized by creditors. You got more money than you would have received through bankruptcy liquidation, and the assets stayed within the family instead of being scattered to random buyers. As the implications sank in, Dad's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching panic as he realized that his threats about inheritance were not just empty, they were backwards. The daughter he was threatening to disinherit was actually the one who controlled everything he thought he was withholding from her. So when you say I'm getting nothing in the will, I prompted gently. There's nothing left to distribute, he finished, his voice barely above a whisper. The will I've been writing, the inheritance plans, the assets I was going to leave to Rebecca, none of it exists anymore. Well, it exists, but it belongs to me now. Which means that instead of you deciding what I inherit, I get to decide what happens to these assets going forward. The power dynamic that had defined our relationship for years had just been completely reversed. The father who had used financial control as a weapon against me had discovered that his daughter had been controlling the family finances for years without his knowledge. But the most devastating realization was yet to come. Dad, there's something else you need to understand about tonight's celebration, I said, watching his face carefully as I prepared to deliver the final blow. The wedding you've been funding to demonstrate your success and generosity? You've been paying for it with money you received from selling assets to me. Essentially, I've been funding Rebecca's wedding while you took credit for providing it. His face went white as he understood that even his moment of patriarchal triumph, the expensive wedding that proved his ability to provide for his favored daughter, had been made possible by the business success of the daughter he had been criticizing. Rebecca doesn't know any of this, he said, more a question than a statement. No one knows except you and me. I've allowed you to maintain your dignity and your image as the family patriarch, even though the financial reality has been completely different for years. We stood in silence for several minutes as Dad processed the complete reversal of everything he thought he understood about his family's financial situation and power structure. What happens now? He asked finally. That depends on you, Dad. I can continue allowing you to live in the house and maintain your current lifestyle while you process this new reality. Or we can have a public conversation about family finances and asset ownership that might be uncomfortable for everyone involved. The threat was subtle but clear. I was giving him the option to acknowledge privately what had happened while maintaining his public dignity, or face the embarrassment of having his financial failures and my subsequent rescue revealed to the community that was currently celebrating his apparent success. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice carrying defeat and resignation. I want the same thing I've always wanted, Dad. I want to be treated with respect instead of criticism. I want my business success to be acknowledged instead of resented. And I want you to stop using inheritance and family assets as weapons to control your daughter's behavior. The conversation was interrupted by Rebecca approaching from the reception area, her wedding gown rustling as she walked across the terrace with obvious concern about our serious discussion. Dad? Samantha? Is everything okay? People are asking about you. Dad looked at me with an expression that mixed desperation with pleading, clearly hoping I wouldn't reveal what we had just discussed on Rebecca's wedding night. Everything's fine, I said, smiling at my sister. Dad and I were just having a conversation about family and business. He was telling me how proud he is of tonight's celebration. It has been perfect, Rebecca agreed, her face lighting up with happiness. Thank you so much for making this possible, Dad. I know how much this wedding cost, and I'm grateful that you prioritized my happiness over everything else. The irony of her gratitude being directed toward someone who had unknowingly spent my money to fund her celebration was not lost on any of us, but particularly on Dad, who now understood that his daughter's thanks belonged to someone else entirely. As Rebecca returned to her reception and Dad and I rejoined the celebration, the power dynamic between us had fundamentally changed. The patriarch who had threatened to disinherit me had learned that he owned nothing to withhold, while the daughter he had criticized for focusing on money had been secretly protecting the family's financial legacy for years. But the evening's revelations were just the beginning of a much larger conversation about family, respect, and the true meaning of success that would reshape our relationships in ways I was only beginning to understand. The remainder of Rebecca's wedding reception proceeded with an undercurrent of tension that was palpable to anyone paying attention to family dynamics. Dad moved through the celebration like a man in shock, going through the motions of the gracious host while processing the reality that everything he thought he controlled was actually owned by the daughter he had just threatened to disinherit. I watched him struggle to maintain his public image as the successful patriarch while privately grappling with the complete reversal of his understanding of our family's power structure. Every congratulation he received for providing such an elegant wedding, every compliment about his generosity and success, now carried the bitter irony of praise for achievements that were actually mine. But the real test of our new dynamic came the following week, when Dad was forced to confront the practical implications of what he had learned. The monthly expenses, property maintenance, and lifestyle costs that he had been managing through his supposed asset sales would need to be addressed now that he understood the true source of his income. The conversation happened in his home office, which was technically my office now, in a house that belonged to one of my companies, as he reviewed financial documents with the desperate attention of someone trying to understand how completely his world had changed. Samantha, I need to understand exactly what my situation is, he said, his voice carrying none of the authoritative tone he had used when threatening my inheritance. If I don't own these properties anymore, if the business is gone, what am I living on? You're living on the proceeds from the asset sales, plus rental income from properties that you now rent back from my companies. The arrangement has been structured to provide you with sufficient income to maintain your current lifestyle without you needing to understand the change in ownership. But what happens long-term? What happens when the sale proceeds are exhausted? The question revealed his growing understanding that his financial independence was now entirely dependent on my continued cooperation and goodwill. The parent who had spent years criticizing my business focus was learning that his survival depended on the success of those same business ventures. Long term. Dad, your financial security depends on the same thing it's been depending on for the past 3 years, the success of my business and my willingness to structure arrangements that allow you to maintain dignity while accepting help. The role reversal was complete. Instead of threatening to control my inheritance, Dad was now dependent on my decisions about his financial future. But the most significant change was in his attitude toward my professional achievements. The business success he had resented and criticized was now revealed as the foundation of the family's financial stability. "I owe you an apology," he said during one of our weekly meetings about family finances. "I spent years dismissing your business expertise while making terrible financial decisions that nearly destroyed everything I had worked to build. You saved our family's legacy when I was too proud to save it myself." The apology was everything I had wanted to hear for years, but it was also painful because it revealed how much damage his pride and stubbornness had caused to our relationship and to his own financial security. "Dad, I didn't buy these assets to prove a point or gain control over you. I bought them to preserve something that would otherwise have been lost to creditors and bankruptcy. The family legacy you're so proud of still exists. It's just owned by someone who knows how to manage it properly." Our conversations gradually evolved from crisis management to genuine collaboration about family financial planning. For the first time in years, Dad was asking for my advice about business decisions and acknowledging my expertise in areas where he had previously dismissed my input. But the most dramatic change came in his relationship with Rebecca, as the new financial reality forced him to confront his favoritism and the unfairness of his previous inheritance plans. "I need to explain something to Rebecca about our family finances," he told me during one of our meetings. "She needs to understand that the inheritance she was expecting doesn't exist in the form I promised. That conversation is between you and Rebecca, Dad. But I think she deserves to know the truth about our family's financial situation and how it's been managed over the past few years." The conversation with Rebecca happened at a family dinner 2 months after her wedding, when Dad finally found the courage to address the reality of his financial situation and the changes in family asset ownership. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something important about the family business and the inheritance you've been expecting," he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to admit fundamental mistakes. "What kind of changes, Dad?" "The business failed, Rebecca. Morrison Properties went bankrupt, and I was forced to sell all the assets to pay creditors. The inheritance I promised you, the properties, the business, the investments, none of it exists anymore." Rebecca's shock was genuine and immediate. She had built her understanding of family finances and her own future security on the assumption that she would inherit substantial assets as the favored daughter. "But the wedding, you paid for everything. How is that possible if the business failed?" "The wedding was paid for with money from selling the assets. And those assets were sold to companies owned by your sister. Samantha essentially funded your wedding while I took credit for providing it." The revelation that I owned everything Dad had promised to leave to Rebecca created a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. Rebecca was forced to confront the reality that the sister she had seen as less successful and less favored had actually been supporting the family financially for years. "Samantha owns the house we grew up in?" Rebecca asked, her voice small with shock and embarrassment. "She owns the house, the business properties, and even the country club where your wedding was held. She's been protecting family assets while I was destroying them through poor financial management." But perhaps the most important outcome of these revelations was Rebecca's own response to learning the truth about our family's financial situation. "I need to apologize to you, Samantha," she said during a private conversation we had after Dad's disclosure. "I've spent years believing that Dad's favoritism toward me was justified because I had better values or made better choices. But learning that you've been supporting our family while being criticized for your success, that's made me realize how wrong our family dynamics have been." The apology meant more to me than any financial victory could have, because it represented genuine recognition and respect from a sister who had previously dismissed my achievements. Rebecca, I didn't preserve these assets to prove superiority or gain control over anyone. I did it because they represent our family's legacy, and I couldn't stand to watch that legacy disappear because of pride and stubbornness. Our relationship began to heal as Rebecca developed genuine appreciation for the business skills she had previously seen as character defects, and as she began to understand that success could be measured in many different ways. But the most satisfying change was in Dad's behavior at subsequent family gatherings. Instead of criticism about my focus on money and business, he began introducing me as my daughter who saved our family business and expressing pride in achievements he had previously resented. The inheritance threats and favoritism that had poisoned our relationship for years were replaced by collaboration and mutual respect based on truthful understanding of our actual family financial situation. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, the complete integration of family assets under my management had created opportunities for growth and expansion that none of us had anticipated when Dad's business was failing. What had begun as a desperate effort to preserve family properties during bankruptcy had evolved into a diversified investment portfolio that was generating more income than Morrison Properties had ever achieved. The commercial properties I had acquired during Dad's financial crisis were now fully occupied with profitable tenants, generating steady rental income that supported not just Dad's lifestyle, but also funded expansion into new real estate investments. The systematic approach to property management and tenant relations that Dad had resisted implementing was now producing results that exceeded his original business projections. But more importantly, the business success was creating opportunities for genuine family collaboration that had been impossible during the years of financial stress and pride-driven conflict. "Samantha, I've been thinking about something," Dad said during one of our weekly business meetings that had replaced our previous arguments about family values and inheritance. "These properties are generating more income than I ever achieved when I owned them directly. Maybe there's a way for me to contribute to this business instead of just being a beneficiary of your management." The request represented a fundamental change in Dad's attitude toward work, expertise, and family collaboration. Instead of defending his previous methods or resenting my business success, he was asking to learn from approaches that had proven more effective than his own. "What kind of contribution did you have in mind?" "I still know the local commercial real estate market better than anyone, and I have relationships with potential tenants and property sellers that could benefit your expansion plans. Maybe I could work as a consultant or advisor, using my experience to support the business instead of just collecting income from it." The proposal was everything I had hoped for years earlier when Dad's business was failing and he had refused my help. Now, with the power dynamic completely reversed, he was offering the same collaboration I had suggested when his pride wouldn't allow him to accept assistance from his unsuccessful daughter. "I think that's an excellent idea, Dad. Your market knowledge and relationships would be valuable assets for expansion planning. We could structure a consulting agreement that gives you a meaningful role in business operations while utilizing expertise that complements my financial and strategic planning skills." Working together professionally for the first time in our adult lives revealed aspects of Dad's business knowledge that I had never fully appreciated. His understanding of local market trends, zoning regulations, and development opportunities was genuinely valuable when combined with proper financial management and strategic planning. But more importantly, the collaboration began healing the personal relationship damage that had accumulated over years of misunderstanding and resentment. "I need you to know that I'm proud of what you've built," he told me during one of our property inspection visits. "Not just financially, but the way you've managed to preserve our family legacy while giving everyone dignity and opportunity to contribute. I was wrong to dismiss your business skills, and I was wrong to use inheritance as a weapon against you." The acknowledgement was more meaningful than any financial victory could have been, because it represented genuine recognition of both my professional capabilities and my commitment to family welfare. But the most significant development came when Rebecca expressed interest in joining our business operations in a capacity that utilized her own skills and interests. I've been watching what you and Dad are building together, and I wonder if there might be a role for me, she said during a family dinner that felt more like a business planning session. I know I don't have experience in commercial real estate, but I do have skills in marketing and event planning that might be useful for property management and tenant relations. Rebecca's interest in contributing to family business success rather than just inheriting family wealth represented a fundamental shift in her understanding of success, responsibility, and family contribution. The property management company could definitely benefit from professional marketing and tenant relations support, I replied. We're handling enough properties now that those functions need dedicated attention rather than just being handled ad hoc. As Rebecca began working part-time with our property management operations, her natural skills in communication and relationship building proved valuable for tenant retention and property marketing. But more importantly, her involvement gave her first-hand understanding of how much work and expertise were required to generate the income she had previously taken for granted. I had no idea how much goes into managing these properties successfully, she told me after her first month of handling tenant communications and lease negotiations. I used to think that rental income was just something that happened automatically, but now I see how much strategy and effort is required to maintain profitable operations. The business success was creating new opportunities beyond just property management. The cash flow from rental properties provided capital for expansion into other investments, including the acquisition of additional commercial properties and even residential development projects that utilized Dad's construction industry connections. But perhaps the most satisfying investment was our partnership with Marcus, Rebecca's husband, whose own business background complemented our real estate focus. I've been talking with Marcus about his logistics company, Dad mentioned during one of our planning meetings. He's looking for warehouse and distribution facilities, and we're looking for stable long-term tenants for commercial properties. Maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration that benefits both businesses. The partnership that developed between our real estate investments and Marcus's logistics operations created mutually beneficial arrangements that reduced his facility costs while providing us with reliable rental income from a tenant we knew and trusted. Within a year of Dad's inheritance threats at Rebecca's wedding, our family had transformed from a struggling patriarch trying to maintain control through financial manipulation into a collaborative business partnership where everyone's skills and expertise were valued and utilized. The most dramatic change was in our family dynamics at social events and celebrations. Instead of the tension and competition that had previously characterized family gatherings, we now had genuine shared interests and achievements to celebrate. I want everyone to know that I'm proud of all my children, Dad announced during a toast at Rebecca's first wedding anniversary celebration. Samantha's business expertise saved our family legacy and created opportunities for all of us to contribute and succeed. Rebecca's marketing skills are helping us build better tenant relationships. And Marcus's logistics business is creating partnerships that benefit everyone involved. The toast was everything I had wanted to hear for years, public acknowledgement of my business success and its positive impact on our family, rather than criticism and resentment. But the most meaningful validation came privately, during a conversation with Dad about long-term business planning and family legacy. Samantha, I want you to know that the inheritance you were never going to receive has turned out to be much more valuable in your hands than it ever would have been in mine, he said. You've built something that provides security and opportunity for the whole family, while teaching all of us the value of genuine collaboration and respect for different types of expertise. The reversal was complete, from threatened disinheritance to acknowledged family savior, from criticized business focus to recognized family asset, from excluded daughter to collaborative partner in a growing business empire. 2 years after Dad's devastating inheritance threat at Rebecca's wedding, I was standing in the conference room of Morrison Holdings, the renamed and expanded company that had grown into the region's most successful commercial real estate investment firm. The transformation had been more comprehensive than I had ever imagined when I first started secretly acquiring Dad's failing assets. The business now controlled over $15 million in commercial real estate, employed 12 people including Dad and Rebecca in meaningful roles, and had earned recognition as one of the fastest-growing family businesses in the state. But more importantly, it had rebuilt family relationships based on mutual respect and genuine collaboration rather than favoritism and financial manipulation. The ultimate validation came when the local business journal featured Morrison Holdings in a cover story about successful family business transitions. The article highlighted our transformation from a failing single-owner operation into a thriving multi-generational partnership that utilized each family member's unique strengths and expertise. The Morrison family demonstrates how business challenges can become opportunities for innovation and growth when family members are willing to acknowledge different types of expertise and work together toward common goals, the article concluded. Their success shows that family businesses thrive when they focus on results rather than hierarchy. But the most satisfying moment came during the photo shoot for the article, when Dad insisted that I be positioned at the center of the group as the company's primary leader and visionary. "This is Samantha's company," he told the photographer. "She saved it when I couldn't, grew it beyond what I ever achieved, and gave all of us opportunities to contribute in meaningful ways. She should be featured prominently because she's the reason this business exists." The public acknowledgement was everything I had wanted for years, recognition of my business expertise and leadership from the father who had previously dismissed my achievements as evidence of misplaced priorities. But perhaps the most meaningful development was how our family business success had attracted attention from other families dealing with similar dynamics of business failure, inheritance conflicts, and intergenerational tension. We keep getting calls from families who are struggling with business transitions and inheritance disputes, Rebecca reported during one of our monthly family business meetings. They want advice about how we manage to transform conflict into collaboration. This interest led to consulting opportunities where we helped other family businesses address the psychological and financial issues that had nearly destroyed our own family relationships. Dad's experience with pride and financial denial, combined with my expertise in business restructuring and family asset preservation, created a unique perspective that proved valuable to families facing similar challenges. Working with other families has helped me understand how common these problems are, Dad reflected during one of our consulting debriefs. Pride, favoritism, and financial secrecy create the same destructive patterns in lots of families. The difference is that most families don't have someone with your business skills willing to intervene and preserve assets while relationships heal. The consulting work was personally fulfilling because it allowed us to help other families avoid the years of conflict and resentment that had characterized our own relationships before the truth about asset ownership forced genuine conversations about respect and collaboration. But the ultimate measure of our transformation came during Rebecca's second pregnancy announcement, when family conversations focused on legacy and intergenerational wealth transfer took on completely different meanings than they had during Dad's inheritance threats. "I want my children to grow up understanding that family wealth comes with responsibilities as well as benefits," Rebecca said during a family dinner where we discussed trust structures and long-term business planning. "They should learn that success requires contribution and expertise, not just inheritance and entitlement." The conversation about creating trust funds and inheritance structures for the next generation was collaborative and focused on education and opportunity rather than control and favoritism. Instead of using wealth as a weapon to enforce family hierarchy, we were planning to use it as a tool for teaching responsibility and business ethics. The trust structures should require meaningful contribution to family business success before beneficiaries can access principal amounts, I suggested. not as punishment or control, but as education about the work and expertise required to preserve and grow family wealth. Dad, who had previously planned to use inheritance as a reward for conventional lifestyle choices and punishment for business focus, was now advocating for structures that would encourage entrepreneurship and business education among his grandchildren. I want them to understand that wealth preservation requires skills and knowledge, not just good intentions, he said. They should learn from Samantha's example that business expertise and strategic thinking are valuable family assets that deserve respect and recognition. The complete reversal of family values and priorities was perhaps the most satisfying outcome of my patient asset acquisition and careful revelation of the truth about family finances. But the ultimate vindication came when the regional business school invited me to speak to students about family business management and intergenerational wealth transition, with Dad and Rebecca participating as co-presenters discussing their perspectives on the transformation process. The most important lesson we learned is that family business success requires acknowledging expertise wherever it exists in the family, regardless of age, gender, or conventional expectations. I told the audience of MBA students who were studying family business dynamics. Dad's portion of the presentation focused on the dangers of pride and the importance of accepting help when business knowledge is insufficient to address complex challenges. I nearly destroyed my family's financial legacy because I was too proud to accept advice from someone whose expertise threatened my self-image as the family patriarch, he admitted to the students. Pride is the most expensive luxury in business, and it's one that family businesses can't afford. Rebecca discussed the importance of understanding that family wealth requires active management and contribution rather than passive inheritance and entitlement. I used to think that being the good daughter meant I deserved to inherit family wealth without understanding how that wealth was created or preserved, she explained. But working in our family business taught me that inheritance should be earned through contribution and expertise, not just family status. As I sit here today, preparing for another speaking engagement about family business transformation and conflict resolution, I'm struck by how completely our family dynamics have changed since Dad's inheritance threat revealed the truth about asset ownership and family financial relationships. The question I want to leave you with is this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone threatened to withhold something they didn't actually control? Have you experienced family members who used financial manipulation as a weapon while being completely dependent on your success or support? And here's the deeper question: when you finally revealed the truth about power dynamics in your relationships, did it destroy those relationships or force them to become healthier and more honest? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable delusions about control and force acknowledgement of actual contributions and dependencies. I'd love to hear your stories about family business conflicts, inheritance manipulation, or situations where you discovered that you had more power than people realized. Drop your experiences in the comments below. These stories help other people understand that they don't have to accept threats or manipulation from people whose power is entirely dependent on their cooperation. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family business drama, inheritance conflicts, and the satisfaction that comes from revealing the truth about who actually holds power in toxic family dynamics. Share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar manipulation tactics or inheritance threats. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we can discuss the complex realities of family business relationships and financial control. Remember that you don't have to accept threats or manipulation from people whose power exists only in their own imagination, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people discover the truth about their actual situation. Don't forget to comment with your own experiences of inheritance manipulation or family business conflicts, like this video if it helped you understand similar power dynamics in your own relationships. Subscribe for more honest conversations about family wealth and control, and share this story with anyone who needs to hear that threats lose their power when they're based on assets the threatener doesn't actually control. Until next time, remember that real power comes from knowledge, expertise, and actual control of resources, not from threats and manipulation based on outdated assumptions. Sometimes the most satisfying moment in any conflict is when someone realizes that their threats are meaningless because you already own everything they're threatening to take away.